Hello, I'm Bob Lindgren. For almost 50 years, I have been a staff member of the Printing Industry Associations, first in Chicago and then in Los Angeles. For those decades, I've worked with the management problems of hundreds of firms in our industry. And thinking back on that period, I am totally amazed by the disaster that we are currently experiencing. There has never been a period during that nearly half a century that I can remember where sales have dropped so far and so rapidly for so many firms. The advent of the COVID virus has simply decimated a very substantial portion of our industry. If your sales are off 40 to 60 or perhaps more, you have a life-threatening problem and you have to do something about it or your business is over. To see why that is, we ought to think about how every business really works. Every firm has both operating and overhead expenses. Operating expenses include factory wages, materials, buyouts, commissions. If sales are down, so are operating expenses. In fact, operating expenses and sales travel up and down in about the same direction and speed. On the other hand, overhead expenses, which include the cost of equipment, the plant, and the front office, don't do that at all. That's the problem. They mostly stay constant. That's the reality that will destroy your business. Contribution is the key. Contribution is simply sales minus operating expense. If contribution is greater than overhead, you're fine and you'll continue to live. If contribution is less than overhead, you're on the way out, unfortunately. Sales are now off dramatically for many firms. The result is large losses, overhead costing more than contribution. Because of this, cash is disappearing, slowed down by the temporary help from the government, like the PPP program. But what happens next? If sales rapidly go back to normal, we'll be okay. Not as good as we were before, but we'll be okay. If the government keeps giving us money, we'll be okay too. If these things don't happen, the business is dead when the cash is gone. Is there a way out of this mess? What can we do about it? Well, yes, we can do something about it. We can make it better. The key is dramatically reducing the overhead. Dramatically does not mean just laying off the receptionist or saving money on paper clips. What's really needed is to make the plant and equipment and front office disappear. But that's crazy. How then do you run a printing business without them? The way forward is consolidation. Because most printers run only a single shift, or perhaps with a partial second as well, that means that putting the two of them together lets one of them do the work of two with just the overhead of one. Remember that when you put the two together in the same plant, the only additional expense this acquiring plant is incurring is the paper and the labor and commission if it's payable. All the overhead is not necessary. How do you get this done? It sounds like a great story. Well, first of all, we have to start to think about the fact who do we want to put together? The obvious choices are printers with similar equipment and customer focus who are in the same general area, as these are the ones where 2 plus 2 can get us back to into survival mode. We don't want to think about companies that are too far away to serve their joint customer bases, or companies with entirely different equipment or customer strategies. Normally, the larger and stronger of the two buys the other. Doesn't this mean, however, that one of them is gone, that the seller just disappears? Not at all, because they have to work together. They have to be partners in the great leap forward, because their customer relationships and the work are the key, not the equipment. They both realize that if they do nothing, one of them will certainly be gone, and very possibly both. How do you start? Well, that's always an exciting question, but you have to start. Usually the larger reaches out to the smaller and starts a conversation, but they usually need help with this to select their targets. This is based upon a consolidation where the larger does the work of the smaller and pays them a fair price for their business based upon what the contribution and sales will bring. Okay, but what's a fair price? Usually it's in the range of 2 or 3 times the annual profit the buyer will earn by bringing this work and its contribution into their shop. The seller then liquidates their equipment, collects their receivables, pays their bills, and pockets the remaining cash. Okay, but I'm going to be the seller and I'd like to get a check up front. Well, I certainly understand that, but it's simply not realistic to be paid in cash, unless, of course, you're satisfied with only a very small amount. The reality is that both parties are dealing with the future, which neither can guarantee. Neither buyer nor seller can guarantee that the sales that they plan on having are going to be there. They can't guarantee that the customers are continuing to buy. That's the problem. And because of that extraordinary level of risk in the transaction, and by the way, while the transaction is risky, doing nothing is riskier. Normally, the seller receives 5 to 15% upfront in exchange for a covenant not to compete and start another printing business. The balance is based upon a percentage of sales from the seller's customers for a period of time. Obviously, if they're able to grow the combined business, that number will be bigger than they originally were planning, and that's fine. If it doesn't work out, then the participants get paid for what actually happens. If the seller continues to be active in the business as a manager or salesperson or production person, they will receive fair compensation for their services. How does the seller fit into this picture? Well, actually, the seller is critical to this story. It won't actually work unless the seller is committed to work with their customer base and continue to grow it. Both parties have to be totally committed to future success. This isn't some sort of free lunch. It is an opportunity to press forward and build. If this commitment isn't there, the deal will hurt both of them. How do I make this happen? You can, of course, do it on your own, but it's easier and safer if you have experienced professional help. Bob Lindgren, that's me, a principal of the Management Guys, a management consulting firm in our industry, has spent a lifetime in our industry and can work with you to make this life-saving win happen by reaching out to potential buyers and then helping them create a fair deal for both. Just give me a call at 818-219-3855 or email bob.lindgren815@gmail.com. You may also want to check out my credentials and background at our website, themanagementshighs.com. Thanks a lot for listening, and I wish you future success and a way forward into escaping the throes of the COVID-19 virus. Thanks again.